This is the second assignment for the fourth quiz, simplifying quadratic expressions. Okay, and this is what it looks like. And this is just going to be practice with simplifying these expressions that result from the quadratic formula. And typically, you know, when we're in a larger problem, yes, I let you use technology to find the roots. But it's also important, how is that done? You know, what do we use to do this? And we use something called the quadratic formula, which is going to be the next quiz worth of material. But we're just going to work at simplifying, because that's really what all of this is about. This unit exists so that we can do the next unit without having to take a bunch of sidetracks. So we did the quadratic formula and we have a result. And then the next thing that you want to try to do is to simplify the square root. So the square root of 27, how does that simplify? And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because we did in the last video. So that's going to be 3 times the square root of 3. So 27 is that largest perfect square that goes in. You have the page where you can look that up. And then the next thing that you do is you look to these 3 values. You look to divide a number into all 3 of those. And so there actually is a number that will go into all 3. And so this is the type where the bottom disappears. So we have -1 plus and minus the square root of 3. And so those have some decimal values, and those would represent the x-intercepts in our quadratic function. Okay, number 2. So again, the first thing we're worried about how to reduce the square root of 20, and that would be 2 times the square root of 5. Now maybe that square root works out perfectly. That actually happens on 5. And so if that happens, then we have an answer that is going to be pretty nice rational number. Okay, so here is, we look at these 3 values, 1, 2, and 4. Is there anything that will divide into all 3 of those other than 1? And there is not. So that stands right there as it is, reduced already. And that is the solution to that. Again, they represent decimal values that represent the x-intercepts of a particular quadratic function. Number 4, square root of 12, that reduces as 2 times the square root of 3. So now we're at the point 2, 2, and 6. We need to look at something that divides into all 3 of those, and that is a 2, the largest number that would go into all 3. So -1 plus and minus the square root of 3 over 3. Over 2. Nope, that's right, 3. So I'm sorry, 2 goes into all of those, so making a 3 on the bottom. Number 5, notice here that the square root of 16 is going to work out perfectly, and that does happen sometimes. And so now what you have is you just have to do, what is -2 minus 4 over 5? That's -6 over 5. And then what is -2 plus 4 over 5? That's 2 over 5. So you're going to get some fraction work in this. So there are times when you do this quadratic formula, this is actually the result of it, and you actually get 2 answers like that. You always get 2 answers, it's just that it's condensed. So one of them, if you're looking at 4, -1 minus the square root of 3 over 3, whatever that decimal is, -1 plus the square root of 3 over 3. Okay, so moving ahead here, number 8. Again, I'm going to try to do ones that kind of have a little bit of a different twist. So we want to look at reducing the square root of 32, which is going to be 4 times the square root of 2. So the largest number that goes into 4, 4, and 8 is 4. So you just divide all of them by that. And there is the result. Okay, I'm going to move up to, we'll do another one here with nice reduction. So the square root of 100 reduces perfectly. I do recommend doing all of these because it's just good practice. Because in the next unit, you're going to get a very healthy dose of this. Okay, so now you have to do both operations. So the first one is 7, negative 3 plus 10, 7 over 5. And then the second one is negative 13 over 5. Really pretty simple. And then we get to ones, and we haven't actually done this, but it's easy enough to explain, where you have the square root of a negative number. And that can happen. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tack on an I. So we actually did the square root of 20 before. That's 2 times the square root of 5. So the breakdown is like this. Square root of 4 times square root of 5 times square root of negative 1. And then the square root of 4 is 2. Take along the square root of 5. And then I is the square root of negative 1. So anytime you have a square root of a negative, we're just going to put an I on the end. So here's where the plus and minus, where the denominator drops out because 2 will divide into all of those. So the difference is now we have an I on the end. And this is a very important skill to practice these. Probably the most important assignment of Quiz 4, that you get a good healthy dose of this, because this is the last step in the quadratic formula.